Welcome back, everyone. We are at No Studios. It's a beautiful day outside, but it is a great day inside. I am in the home stretch of the interviews that we've been doing with our No Studio members. I'm Beth Ridley. I've been at this since 1 o'clock. I feel like it's been a marathon, and I thought I'd be exhausted at the end. But with each interview, I get more inspired and more energized because the stories are amazing. The advice is so enriching. I could keep doing this forever and ever and ever. But all good things have to come to an end. So we are closing things out with Kate Schwartz. I'm super excited to talk to you, and thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
So Kate, I ran through your resume a little bit. There's 3 things that I want to talk to you about. The work that you do, the initiative that you're working on with Washington Park, and your philosophy around life. All super energizing and compelling. So let's chip those off one by one.
Sounds good.
So your job is you're an arts management consultant and community organizer. What does that mean? What do you do on a daily basis?
Well, it's a little bit of everything, right? It's a lot of grant writing, so that's the least sexy part of it, and it is a lot of volunteer time, and a lot of troubleshooing, a lot of fires to put out, a lot of fires to make, light fires underneath. And so it's, I have a graduate degree in arts management, and so I can do a little bit of everything. It draws from it's a terminal degree in the United States. In Europe, it's PhD, and you would teach at that level. But it's more practical for me to draw from the legal aspect, the business aspect, and then the humanities aspect of arts. And then I throw in community because what's the point of it without community?
What's the point?
Right.
I love it. And we've got an amazing crowd here at No Studios. Everybody show some love. Woohoo! All right. And I want to make sure that we can all hear what Kate has to say. So let's focus our attention over here. So Kate, obviously you're really good at what you do because you were just awarded a creative residency from Stillwater's Collective, where you're going to focus on Washington Park.
Yes.
So tell us all about, so congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Really excited.
And tell us what that award means and why it's bringing you to Washington Park and what you're going to be doing with Washington Park.
So the creative residency that Stillwater's Collective is doing, this is its first year, so we are part of cohort 0, and this is run by Dasha Kelly, and she does a lot of spoken word and community activism and pairing those 2 things together. And she put forth this challenge of how can you use the creativity to engage the community, right? What we're all doing, what No Studios does, what Washington Park does, and she really wanted. She's a idea artist. She just is so capable to you can throw anything at her and she'll mold it and melt it and hand it back to you, and you're like, that's what I wanted to say.
An idea artist, that's a thing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
She goes under poet, writer, teacher, all that stuff, but really what she can do, she wanted an idea. She didn't want, and maybe with my grant writing background, it was very uncomfortable for me to go on the creative side of things, because I'm used to holding up the creatives, like, we want to do this is why, and then, and in addition, to hand something off super unpolished. But that was the requirement of this submission. So it was an incredibly liberating experience just to apply to it, let alone to receive it. And then the idea we put forth is we'll be using the Washington Park Wednesdays as a platform for a gathered audience already, essentially, that's using the park. And we'll record, and again, you have to bear in mind that this is in the idea stage, right?
Yeah.
So it might change.
Yeah.
But the general idea is we'll ask anyone who wants to participate, what was this park? What's the history of this park? What is this park? And what do you see this park becoming? So those are the 3 prompts. And from those stories and those memories, we'll then, it will be an audio recording primarily, because people respond differently on film.
Right.
And differently in conversation too. We will then make it available, again, this is loose-ended, make it available to area artists to use those ideas to make art, whether Classic wants to remix it into a song, or whether a visual artist wants to paint, wants to build a sculpture.
Cool. So almost creating the catalyst for further inspiration.
Right. So use it in a derivative way for their own art, and then presumably have some sort of presentation or callback or return to the park, whether it's a public art installation or whether it's a performance, depending on what comes from it.
Now, to be clear, was the request for proposals specifically for Washington Park, or did you put forth the suggestions to do something around Washington Park?
Stillwater's Collective had selected, they had a couple different tiers of proposals, but each of them were matched with neighborhoods. And we're matched with the Washington Heights neighborhood, which is part of Washington Park. So it matched with what I was already doing
Now
there.
tell me, what attracted you to Washington Heights and Washington Park? What do you find compelling with that part of town?
So I live in Wauwatosa, and we have a lovely concert series at Hart Park, also on a Wednesday. And it's a beautiful space, and kids run around, and there's a playground and a river, and it's great. It's great, and it's literally across the street from my house. Like, that's how close I live there. I'm about 2 miles from Washington Park. But if you've never been to Washington Park, there's something about the space that is unlike any place else in Milwaukee. And it has a historic Art Deco bandshell that's pretty much identical to the Hollywood Bowl. Collections of colonies of bees said as much. They've played there, and they were like, no, it's exactly like playing the Hollywood Bowl. They weren't just making an analogy. They were like, no,
it's our Hollywood of Wisconsin.
It's our Hollywood Bowl in Wisconsin. So yes, there's that, and it's amazing. But then the lawn itself, for family gatherings, it's easier to keep track of the kids than, say, at Hart or some other of the area concert series. Like, you can see it's a bowl. So the Hollywood Bowl is there, which is the Emil Blatz, formerly the Emil Blatz Music Temple, and now the Washington Park Bandshell. And then the lawn is in a bowl, so the kids can sort of run around, and you can track them the whole time.
So wait, so what you're saying is great acoustics, and I won't lose my kids?
Yeah, totally.
Sign me up, I'm sold.
Totally, win-win. The Urban Ecology Center is there too.
Yeah, love the Urban Ecology Center.
Yep, and they are such great stewards of the park, and of course the park system itself has taken good care. And the park is historically, it was made by Olmsted, and we have a couple of those, and his whole point was to create create natural settings in urban landscapes for people to come together. And that's and the thing about Washington Park is it's kind of mind-blowing to be in it, and yet it's super underutilized. And that was curious to me, because it's like, why aren't we here all the time? Like, rain, shine, winter, because it's magical.
And what do you think some of the reasons for that are?
I think there's, and this is where the park series comes into play, is there's it's a question, it's a question of access. It's a question of knowledge about it. Like, even though it takes up this huge radius, you're just driving around it. And part of Washington Park Wednesday Summer Concert Series, like, the biggest part is basically we're trying to draw those neighboring neighborhoods to use their park, to really associate their neighborhoods with this park, which are, the neighborhoods are Martin Drive, Sherman Park, Walnut Hill, and Washington Heights. So, and if you look at those 4 neighborhoods, they're very, very different from one another.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Very different from one another. And so, but here's this common space.
Right.
And again, how Olmsted had wanted us all to just hang out. And here's me from, Tosa, right? Who just has this, it's more of a, it might be more of a esoteric connection to the park, but it would be a shame to just let it sit there,
Right.
And so how can we get people to come to their park? How can we get people, so the mission is twofold. It's how can we get these 4 neighborhoods to engage, and then how can we get the rest of Milwaukee to show up as well, just to celebrate that it's there,
Yeah, well, I love that it's a central gathering point for so many diverse neighborhoods that are around it.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's going to be super successful.
Yep.
Through a lot of your efforts. So tell us, what is your path to what you do today? Like, where did you come from? Are you a Milwaukee native? And how did you get in the field of arts management consultant and community organizer?
Right. I'm not from Milwaukee. I kind of consider myself to be a chronic tourist in a lot of ways. I'm from the great state of Maine, which its license plate tagline is vacation land, so I've had exposure to a lot of tourists growing up. But I remember living in Buffalo. I did graduate work in Buffalo, and I remember moving to Detroit for some postgraduate work, and I remember my boss at the time said, "Ugh, Detroit," and I was like, at the time, Buffalo and Detroit hadn't come into their renaissance. And I was like, I'm not sure that you can really diss Detroit right now, Buffalo. But she said, you know what, Kate, you make the most of any situation you're in. You'll do fine in Detroit. And I was like, I do that, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, one of your prompt questions was, what are you passionate about? This
Yes.
is, and I almost watered it down by saying, like, I'm just passionate about everything. It's in front of me, and I want to elevate it. I want to seek it. I'm curious about it.
Yeah.
But that seemed like a little bit of a cop out. So
Yeah.
Oh
no, I've got some more quotes here for you, and I want to get into that because I was like, we are ending on like a high note here. My specific question is, what are you passionate about, and how does that passion get expressed? Here's your answer. I'm passionate about chaos. I fear, crave, and succumb to and revel in chaos. I'm actually afraid of you. Because I avoid chaos by any means necessary. Tell me about that.
So I came to this conclusion probably about 7 or 8 months ago. I was at one of the Creative Mornings lectures,
Yeah.
which I would highly recommend.
Yeah, no, I just started going to those. They're
Yeah.
fantastic.
They're really great. And Todd Brody, this was the lecturer, and the subject was chaos. And I was like, let's see what this is about. And he just gave the kindest, most scientific, and yet also most magical sort of explanation as to why chaos is necessary and why, and for me also, I mean for anyone, inevitable. And what he talked about is less about our concept of chaos, which is, it's totally natural to fear me talking about it.
Yeah.
But he talked about emergence, and that is something that is, in the physics sense of the word chaos. It's something that's sensitive to very small changes, which makes it unstable. But it also means that something comes out of it. And that's what I realized. It was like even today, like a very small example is I had to rendezvous with my husband, and I had to bring my kid here, even though I hadn't planned on bringing him here. So you're always that's a very tiny, that's not chaotic, but that's a very tiny example of like, I gotta figure out how this is gonna work, and then see what happens, right?
Yeah.
So worst case scenario, he would be sitting on the couch drawing still. Best case scenario, Eben shows up, and they take off, and now I can focus on you.
Right.
So it's this idea of like, I think people fear chaos because they crave control, and it's kind of like, I think it was, I wear a ghost dog necklace that says ghost dog. I don't know if anyone has seen this film, but it starred Forrest Whitaker, and it was directed by Jim Jarmusch in mid-90s. And he says, he's a modern-day urban samurai is the premise of the film, and he says, he said what I used to say as a kid, which was, and not having seen the film yet, he says, when people are caught in a sudden rainstorm, I'm paraphrasing, they are first resolved not to get wet. So they duck under doorways, they cover their heads, they run to their cars. But if they are resolved that they'll get wet from the very beginning, then they find there's a lot of beauty in that and a lot of a release and freedom in that, right?
Right.
Because when I had thought about it as a kid, before I saw this film, and it blew my mind that was my thought, I said, you just get wet and then you dry off. Like it's not, it's not the end of the world, right?
Right.
And another example about water, incidentally, is just last week, I was at the opening of Hart Park Beer Garden, and there's a rope swing. And my daughter really wanted to go on it, and I said, you should do it. Just understand that physics and pendulum, and you want to go out and kick out more so you come back. And worst case scenario, you fall in the creek, and it's not a big deal. Like, it's going to be muddy and kind of, whatever, but you'll be fine. And she waited for another kid to do it, and then she did it. And then I watched like 7 little girls go out and come back, and I was like, yeah, no problem. I did it. Sure enough, I went out, right in the water, right in the drink. So and my daughter was just like totally like mortified and like, you know, just like, oh, are you, you know, just, she's 9 and she was just beside herself.
Yeah.
And I was like, she's like, are you okay? Are you upset that you did it? I was like, no, I told you, this is literally the worst case scenario.
Right.
And I mean, these are the shoes. They're
Yeah.
dry now, and I'm fine. And like, I wouldn't have experienced that had I not tried. You know,
Right.
it's that age old. My dad always says it's better to say I'm glad I did instead of I wish I had.
Yeah.
Now I know I shouldn't have because I don't have the extra body strength. But again, things you learn about yourself.
Yeah, so I think chaos like needs a new branding.
It
I feel like it's been misbranded.
Totally.
And that we should sort of like find the you know, it's like two sides of every coin. Like chaos, the old definition of it was like doom and disaster.
Right.
But then it's also opportunity, and it puts new things in motion.
Puts new things in motion, and it creates. I mean, it is our creation, our creator, right? So if you lend to the chaos theory, or you know, or any other theory, really, we can't. This is where the universe came from.
Yeah. Now, do you have a physics background?
No, not
Okay,
at all.
because you were very descriptive about the laws of physics.
I'm just a nerd.
Yeah. Oh, okay, got it. Well, all right. Those are, you know, nerds are in these days.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve Jobs. So we dropped off at Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
What brought you to Milwaukee?
My husband's job. He is a neuropsychologist, and there is a niche market for neuropsychology in Milwaukee. And we never moved here, and that's the other thing about our sort of where I'm from is I went to school in Portland, Oregon, undergrad in Portland, Oregon, graduate school in Buffalo. We lived in Detroit. We lived in New York for a while. I think everybody should live in New York at some point in their life.
100% agree.
Yep.
10 years in Brooklyn.
Yes, yeah, nice. Yep, and so we bounced around just mainly from schooling, and this was like the first like jobby job. And so, it was sort of a, you know, it was like, well, do a 3-year plan here, and then we'll move back home, and you know, whatever. We're
I had that plan too. 16 years later.
Yeah, okay. It's good. See, so yep, it's been longer than 3 years for sure.
Yeah.
We've been here about 8 years, I believe, and we're realizing that, and it took me a long. I'm also a chronic procrastinator, so I never really like knowing that we would leave. I never really delved in really deep.
Subtle planted roots.
Yeah, I just sort of, I have wonderful, wonderful friends and like because my family's not here, a great network. But I never really looked at community as mine. Any community, Tosa, Washington Heights, you know, downtown. Milwaukee. I just sort of was like, this is a nice place to be for a while.
Right.
And then at some point I realized this is a great place to be, and I want to make it the best. I want to make it better.
So interesting. So your work is around a community builder. So you probably think about community. What does community mean? A lot. You have lived in a lot of places, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, and now you're here in Milwaukee. And a little bit similar to you in the sense that I'm from Milwaukee, but lived and worked all over the world and then came back.
Right.
So I see Milwaukee from a couple of lenses. And on one hand, Milwaukee has a really strong community because there are a lot of people who choose not to leave Milwaukee because it is a great place, which also makes it feel a little parochial.
Yeah.
But then you've lived and worked at a lot of places, and you're coming to Milwaukee and you're building community. So just what are your reflections on community and Milwaukee from your perspective that maybe we take for granted, or for those of us who have been here for a long time don't see?
Sure. Well, I'd have to think about it like because of the work that I do for the park, and then also I manage a small independent hip-hop label out of Western New York. I have to always think about audience. So we're using the word community, and I'm working on translating that essentially. But if I can speak about audience in that relation, as it relates rather, it would be, I'll create that metaphor because there's something to me. I remember I was trying to bring one of our artists here. And he was, you know, he was pretty in demand, I feel like. I mean, this is underground hip hop, so it's pretty it's pretty prolific. So it's hard to say, like, drop a name. But I was actually talking to one of your podcast members there, Q the Sun, about I ran into him at a show, and I met him at that show, and I talked to him about venues, and this was before my Washington Park stuff, and bringing this guy to Milwaukee. And he said, you'll have a better show in Milwaukee than you will in Chicago. And in the record label, we would always call this, there's like a weird corridor of Chicago, Milwaukee that's so like no man's land for outsiders to play.
Yeah.
It was super strange. We can fill a room in like Oshkosh, like like no problem with, again, obscure hip hop artists. People, Oshkosh loves us, but we can't play Chicago, Milwaukee. We could never do that before my time. And so, and Kiran had said like, it's kind of an insular scene. And the same sort of goes for like, I feel like the community, like we are a city of neighborhoods, right? But I get a lot of strange looks, like I'm not from any of those neighboring neighborhoods, and I'm programming the park series. But it's because, and then I'm right on the line there at Tosa, and Tosa's like a whole other world to those 4 neighborhoods, and those 4 neighborhoods a whole other world to their neighborhood. And I think that there's something beautiful about the city of neighborhoods, because you do get this sort of familial feeling, and you do get this, there's a closeness to it, but there's also this kind of separation where you're just sort of keeping to yourself.
Right.
And so part of the mission at Washington Park is to tie in these neighborhoods, and then also, like I said, to showcase the West Side to Bayview. Like the joke about Bayview, for example, is like nobody ever leaves Bayview, and I feel like you could say that about any neighborhood in Milwaukee. I don't know why we pick on Bayview. I feel like everyone's like, nope, I got my thing. It's I have my concert series, I have my taco stand, I have my bar, and I don't need to go anyplace else. Maybe I'll go down to the waterfront because it's beautiful, but that's pretty much as far as we go. This again, I could be totally wrong. This is my outsider perspective.
It's kind of interesting. I actually never thought of it that way, but in my previous job, I did a lot of work in Phoenix. And so Phoenix, I feel like it is not a city of neighborhoods. It's just a city of strip malls. And so it didn't seem like people had an issue coming together, because you're coming from and you're going out, and it seemed like it was a lot more like fluent, transient, integrated. I never really thought of that. We do have so many discrete neighborhoods, and on one hand, it's a lot of neighborhood pride.
Yeah.
You're right, but then the challenge is, the flip side of that, the challenge is getting people to come out of their neighborhood to support something that might be, 10 minutes away.
Yep.
And I'm guilty of it too, because if somebody told me to go from my neighborhood in Whitefish Bay to Brookfield, I'd be like, it has to be a really good reason.
Totally. And that's what we're trying to build at Washington Park, again, without diluting or compromising what is already there. That's our first priority, is everyone who's already there, right? Like a good neighborhood, but a series of neighborhoods. And then from there, it's also like, your sister hasn't even made it over. We've been talking for almost, close to a year now. And she's like, sorry, I know she's in and out of town, but like, she's like, sorry, I actually haven't made it to the park. And I'm like, that's, I know everybody's busy, but like, everything in this town, that's the other thing from an outsider's perspective, everything in this town is literally 6 miles away, which is amazing.
Why would I call it a 3-song town. I can make it literally from Whitefish Bay to Brookfield in 3 songs on the radio.
Totally.
But so no excuse.
But you still make the excuse of it has to be really good. And so what we're trying to do with the programming, I've been there for a year, this is my 2nd year, is we're trying to make it that people want to come out for it. And so we're the only series that curates underneath a theme. So that way, and then we have, of course, all our amazing vendors and partners in the park, whether it's, Renee doing henna, or Venture making a beer just for the band shell, or whatever it might be. AWE helps the kids make art and stuff. And or the theme would be, we have a farm to park theme, we have a Viva theme, we'll be celebrating Hip Hop Week, like I said, there's a ride on theme, so if you're on a bike, so you can pick what you want from that theme, or from who's going to be there, who's going to be vending, or who's going to be on stage.
Got it. So it's really it's curated. So you
It's
sort of
absolutely
know
curated.
it's tying together before you get there. All right. So I cannot end this conversation without going back to, I'm sorry, you manage a hip hop what? And how did a girl from Maine get into that line of business?
It's a good question. So the arts management, again, draws from, the degree draws from several different schools. And I wrote my thesis on the emergence of advocacy during, with changes in the distribution of music. Essentially, when music became digital, then it was all these like very big commercial artists were showing up in Washington and saying, "Don't let it happen. Close down the systems. Net neutrality is terrible. Like whatever. They were against what I thought the people should be for, and they." So I wrote this thesis, and this tiny hip hop label out of Buffalo read it, and we figured out we knew a bunch of people by the end of the day, because Buffalo is very similar to Milwaukee. Actually, I think that's why I've taken to it, because I love Buffalo too. But at the time, they were just looking for, I'm not sure what they were looking for, but they found me, and they read that thesis, which is like, oh, thanks, you're the one, like the 3 people that read that thesis. I worked really hard on it. So we just started working together. It's a very small operation, and I'm super intermittent. Like, months will go by, and people, like our handful of artists, probably, it's smaller now even, but it's like 10 to 12 at any given moment. It's super tiny, but we've been around for over 20 years. And so months will go by, people will go in the studio, or we book the tour, and then there's like a rush, and then we're onto the next thing. But that's how, because it's so small, we're all hands on deck. So I started booking, and this Washington Park experience is the first time I'm the venue. So I'm used to dealing with venues and cities, and we tour internationally. So I'm used to that whole negotiation, but it made me. As a venue, it may, like a lot of times they'll give you a shoddy door deal, or they'll give you like a low guarantee that only covers your travel expenses. And so we really made it a priority. In addition to the audience, we also try as best we can with the limited funding that we have, which we're always looking for sponsors. We make sure that the artists get paid. And like that's very important to us too. Even if it's nominal, we're not really in that school of thought of like, it'll be great exposure for you, like, look at this amazing band shell. It's like, no, we want you to do this for our neighborhood, and we want to do it right by you as well. And we had a couple amazing artists last year that did play at no cost, and we were able to dig in our pockets and find something for them after the fact. And because it's that important, it's easy enough to be like, sweet, that's over, it's September, but it's pretty important to us, because there's, as we know, as why we're here, there is an incredible value to art in all its forms.
Yeah, so I think it's building community here at home, but building community broader through the hip hop community that you're building.
Yeah.
So, oh my goodness, Kate Schwartz, arts consultant, community builder, hip hop aficionado.
I don't know if
There's probably a whole bunch of other titles. You are an amazing person to be the final interview in a series of fantastic interviews here at No Studios. I couldn't be more pleased. I learned so much, and I've been so inspired. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, because if you come to No Studios, you get more of this every day, each and every day.
For sure.
Amazing people doing amazing things. Mm-hmm. So we're going to end this in the spirit of chaos, because that's what you're all about. We're going to drop the mic. I'm a little worried that the mic is going to break, but we're going to drop it anyway in the spirit of chaos. We'll drop it gently. Ready, Kate?
Ready. Here we go.